3,000. Big. 31 target, north scoop stack, 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one. Can I remember if red is good or green is good?
I don't know, but you got fired. It's counting up.
That's fine.
So, you had one job. You fucked
I
it up.
deserve to be fired.
You got fired. All right. Well, welcome back once again. Today's going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about old people.
Yeah, which we are.
We're getting there anyways.
Man,
Speak for yourself. Fucking geriatric or
Seriously.
septuagenarian, whatever you are.
Okay.
But there I go using big words again. I should stop that, right?
Yeah. Do you even know what those mean?
No, but I heard them. I watch Fox News every now and then, and I heard them talking about that. So
yeah, see if you can use it in a sentence, we know that.
say. My rule is say it, spell it, use it in a sentence. I'm not sure I could spell those.
I don't think you could spell those.
No, I'm not a smart guy. Never claimed to be.
All right, ones. Well, today we're going to talk about a couple of things. I read an interesting article recently, and I'm going to give credit to the guy who wrote it. His name's Joseph Burns. And he went around and interviewed a bunch of older men, guys kind of in there. I think like 55 plus was kind of the target audience, and came up with 5 lessons that men learn too late in life. And those are the things that we're going to talk about today. Because on the podcast, even in our intro, we say this is the show we wish we would have had when we were younger men, right?
Was this specifically for men, or was it men and women?
I think it was just men.
Was it? Okay.
Yep, it was specific to men. So, so we thought we'd talk about a couple of things related to that subject, especially for the younger guys out there, because these are just little nuggets of wisdom that seem to be repeated for a lot of men.
No new lessons, right?
Yeah, right. As they kind of journey through life. So.
Well, I think you and I have had some good discussions. I was telling you a story the other day about a family member that called me, and he called me right before Christmas and was talking about, he was just asking me some questions, and we ended up getting off on some things. And, me and this family member haven't really talked a lot in a really, really long time, like years maybe. And when I hung up the phone, I was talking to Katie, and I kind of had this feeling like, he's in his mid-40s now, and I can't help but think that he's probably sitting at his house looking back on his 40 plus years and starting to kind of do some introspection and maybe debriefing a little bit in between his ears and seeing that maybe he's made some mistakes.
Yeah.
Maybe some things didn't work out the way that he thought they would, or maybe he valued the wrong things when he was younger or something like that,
Yeah,
So
well, I think one of the easy pitfalls for guys, especially when they're younger, is there's no horizon line in front of you when you're young.
Yeah.
You kind of feel like you got a lot of time.
Live fast, die young. With
Yeah,
a good corpse.
Well, you do. You kind of you don't see that horizon line, and so you feel like you've got a lot of time to do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And when you hit your 40s and 50s, you start to realize that you don't got a lot. I mean, especially when you start having friends around you that are similar age to you that pass away from cancer or a heart attack or some kind of crazy shit like that. And then all of a sudden, like, it kind of hits you in the face a little bit that, holy shit, dude, I'm kind of in that. Yeah. I'm in that age group now where these things are happening to people. And so,
well, let's not
I think
lose
guys tend to get a little more reflective as they get older, but that's the point of this conversation today, right? Is, hey guys, be aware of these things, because you may not recognize it yet because you're not mature enough. You haven't had the life experience. You haven't had the failures, the losses, the things to kind of change your perception and your viewpoint to recognize some of these things. And that's why we're throwing them out to you.
Yeah. And we say it all the time about how, if we could go back and talk to our younger selves, these are some things that we tell them. And let's not lose sight of the fact that, we benefited from a career that had a finite beginning and end.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get into career fields, maybe not in the military, they get into career fields that maybe don't have a finish line.
Yeah.
We definitely had a finish line, and our target was always, hit that 20-year mark. If we hit that 20-year mark, then we're good. And then you kind of start the next chapter of your life. Well, what if you're a guy that gets into, I don't know, you're managing programs for company X? There's no real finish line on that. I mean, you can kind of work that forever. So, you couple that with the fact that when you're younger, you probably get married, you have some kids, and you kind of get into this snowball or kind of this rat nest of life that just, you kind of get on cruise control. It's get up, take a shit, go to work, come home, play with the kids, put them to bed, get up and do it again the next day. And before you know it, 10 years have gone by.
Yeah.
Well, now multiply that a few times, and before you know it, you're 50 and you're sitting here going, holy shit, what did I do with my life?
Yeah.
So I could definitely see from some people's perspective, depending on the kind of life that they lived. And I think that we'll highlight some things as we go through this. I know I've got some good notes on people who were interviewed that looked back and found different things that they thought were important. And a few of those I think they're going to pop out here.
And at the end of the day, it comes back to balance too. And it's not just, I think the question that a lot of guys end up asking themselves when they hit 50 after being in that battle rhythm is not just what do I do with my life, but what have I done?
Yeah.
What just happened in the last 25 years? Am I in a better position than I was then? I may be financially, but what about health? What about my the mental aspects of me? What about my relationships? And so I think what we're trying to teach you guys is just, there's things to consider, right? Have balance. We're not saying don't go chase your career. Don't go do the best you can. Don't go achieve those things that are important to you from a professional standpoint. But it comes back to balance, right? And at the end of the day, when you're in your deathbed, being surrounded by your trophies and your accolades is probably not going to be as good as being surrounded by a bunch of people that you have close relationships with that really care about you. So
no, I watched
but we'll get to it.
Yeah, I watched this really cool documentary on Nick Saban. We talked about Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Mike Norvell and stuff in a previous episode, but Nick Saban just retired from the Crimson Tide, so I was a little heartbroken over that. But you know what? It's a new chapter, man. It's going to give some insight to a lot of fans, I think, on what it's like to be a football fan again, because you kind of have to, your team has to be your ride or die, whether they have an 8-8 season or a 14-0 season or whatever. So, but I watched this documentary with him and they interviewed his kids a lot, and his kids were talking about how he wasn't around a lot. I mean, you can imagine, you're an elite level NCAA coach for all those years. I mean, he's been coaching. Yeah, he's been coaching for 50 plus years, you know, and doesn't have a lot of memories with his family and stuff. And you could tell in this, in his post-retirement interviews and even in that documentary, you can tell that kind of weighed on him just a little bit. And he's got enough self-awareness, I believe, to where he even said it in this interview that he did with Reese Davis just a few days ago, where he said, look, I don't feel like I can compete at the same level that I used to.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm doing a disservice to the kids, to the players, if I continue this. It would be selfish on my part. So he decided to hang them up.
Dude, that's integrity.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's being true to yourself. And that's knowing yourself.
Yeah, that's knowing yourself too.
But the point that I was trying to make with him was he made a comment in that interview where he said, look, when you get to the end here, you can have a record or you can have a legacy, and it's your choice. And I think that he's left a pretty decent legacy on NCAA football. Well, what if we translated that into our personal lives and say, look, man, you can have a record of all these accomplishments and shit hanging on your wall, but what's going to be on your epitaph?
Yeah.
That's your legacy.
Yeah.
Who's going to be there to wipe your ass when you're wearing diapers when you're 80? Those kinds of questions. Yeah. And so, let's jump into it, man.
Okay. Well, the first one that he brings up in the article is that relationships require constant effort and compromise. So I think the first thing that you have to do before you jump into any kind of serious relationship, especially if you're considering getting married or things like that, is, dude, you really have to have some self-inspection and some self-awareness about who you are and what you're about and what you really want in life, so that you can make sure that those things marry up. I think that it's really easy when we're younger. There's a lot of push, typically to get established in a career, make strides, sacrifice a lot of home time, family time, relationships, even to a certain extent, to prove yourself. I think that there's often, especially when we're younger, a lot of bravado and ego involved. Um, and the thing about relationships, especially if you have a significant other, is did you have to commit a lot of intentionality and time and attention to continue to cultivate that relationship. When you start out with somebody, maybe you have you think you share the same values, you guys are kind of on the same sheet of music, you do the similar things, you believe the similar things like that. Well, you get married, get established in careers, maybe kids come along. If you don't do anything to cultivate that and to continue to grow together and figure things out together and find new ways to enhance your relationship, and to seek out ways to have points of connection with each other, what you have now is not going to work. It's not going to sustain itself over the long haul, right? And so I think what often happens is, especially when we're younger, we take spouses, families, close friends a little bit for granted. And I think we often expect the same things out of relationships as they evolve, instead of trying to discover new ways to engage and keep things, fresh, if you will, and make false assumptions about the bonds that we have created with people because they feel important to us. And we think that those things are going to endure regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, as you grow into your 30s and your 40s, dude, your perceptions, your ideas, your values may shift, and so may your spouses. And if you guys aren't keeping tabs on that, and you guys aren't talking about those things and working through those things together, that's where it's really easy to get on separate vectors.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you're in bed laying next to somebody and you're like, who the fuck is that person?
Yeah.
Happened to me in my first marriage.
Happens all the time.
And I wasn't the best at cultivating and maintaining points of connection when I was younger, because I was very focused on being the best fighter pilot I could be. And that was probably part of what led to the end of that relationship to a certain extent, definitely part of the role that I played in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so.
No, I there's some really good, I think some good discussion points in there. And one of them is like, let's take Katie and I, for example. We met when we were 20. We got married when we were 23. Dude, I didn't know who the fuck I was, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just a raging 21-year-old, man, hair on fire. I was playing in a band. I got free beer at every bar I went to, man. I was living life by the seat of my pants. And she was kind of the same way. She was a little bit more driven. She was in school and she was going for a nursing degree, but we kind of didn't have a care in the world, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll be the first ones to tell you that we got lucky, but take that 23-year-old, fast forward like 5 years, and now we've got 2 more kids. We've got a full house. I'm going to school. I'm working full time. She's working full time. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Like we're busy as fuck. Right. And so you're right, man. You have to commit to these things and you have to make a decision to grow together. And that's where I think that we see, and this is just talking about marriages and your kind of interspousal kind of relationships for one. But I think that choice to go separate ways, sometimes it's insidious, but you have to snap that back occasionally. And I know, in our 26-year-old relationship between Katie and I, we've had that discussion a few times, and we choose to grow together.
Yeah.
We choose to do things of mutual interest. We choose to, and it's maybe not every day, but she knows that there's things that I enjoy and I know that there's things that she enjoys. And we try to take time to do those things for each other and with each other so that we're moving kind of in concert towards the end here.
Yeah. And that's so important, man. I mean, one of the things that Alicia and I do is we try every week to do what we call a check-in. And it's nothing big. It's usually us in the morning with coffee and tea out by the fire pit in the backyard for about an hour. But we just talk about, we express appreciation for each other. Hey, here's a couple things that I really appreciate about you, or here's a couple of things that you did this week that I really appreciate, or hey, were there any kind of points of disconnection or conflict things that we need to talk about that happened this week? And how could we have approached those differently? And what we need to work on and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's been a very good exercise for us, just to kind of stay connected and stay on the same path. And then we have little rituals of connection that we do coming back from trips and things like that, that just are, kind of ways that we get back together.
Yeah, but those are healthy though.
They're healthy.
Those are super healthy.
What I would say to younger guys too is learn to actively listen. Like you got to learn how to, it's really hard because I think as guys in particular, we're kind of taught to be problem solvers. We kind of have that mindset already. And we'll talk about this when we do the empathy and validation episode, because validation is so important. But I've learned that when Alicia comes to me and has something to say or wants to talk about something, I just listen. And a lot of time, I just try to validate what she's feeling with words like, man, that sounds really frustrating, or man, that would really piss me off too, or things like that. And I don't problem solve anything unless she specifically I don't present a solution unless she asks me a specific question. Or at the end of it, I may go, just so we're clear, are you just sharing this with me, or is this something that you're asking me to help you solve? Right. That's one way to actively listen.
Oh, I suck at that so bad.
We all do, right? But then the other things too is you got to express affection, man, and find out what works for your partner, because they talk about the 5 love languages and all that stuff, right? But really, just find out what works for your partner. How do they like affection to be expressed to them, and then look for ways to do that. And then you got to plan meaningful time together. Having date nights is important. I mean, scheduling sex if you have to when you have a bunch of kids is important.
No, that's because you're right, man. And we kind of we chuckle about that, but sometimes you have to do that.
Sometimes you do, man. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way, because guess what, dude? When you have it on the calendar, guess what you're looking forward to all week, right? And so there's anticipation around it, and that intimacy is important. So,
I can point to a bunch of times in our marriage and our relationship overall where you just get so busy doing stuff. And my focus, like flight school was a big one for me, where I'm so focused on that for, 20 hours a day. That's all I'm thinking about. And then I come home on a Friday and she wants to go across the way and have some drinks with the neighbors. I'm like, that's like the last thing on my mind right now, or she wants to snuggle up and watch a movie, or we had something scheduled on the calendar to go upstairs for a little bit. I'm like, I'm just totally not into this. But I wrote this in my book, where you have to make yourself do that. You have to remember why you got together in the first place. It's because you fucking like each other.
Yeah. And
don't forget that.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things that go into that. First of all, if we're completely honest, there are going to be times in your life where it's busy like that, right? Where maybe you have something going on at work, or you're striving for a position and it's taken up a lot of your time. Being open and honest and authentic and transparent with your partner and going, hey, the next 6 months, it's going to be tough, so what can we do to kind of overcome this? Because this is what I'm trying to do so that we can get here, because this is how it's going to benefit us. Then you're kind of working on the same sheet of music, right? And everybody is operating under the same assumptions as to what's going on. The other thing that I had to learn how to do in the Air Force, which was difficult, but I learned how to do very well, was when I left the base, I left the base.
Yeah, I didn't do that very well.
I very seldom, even when I was a commander, I very seldom brought anything home with me.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
And so because, and you can attest to this with our time in the Air Force, deployments, TDYs, just the fucking daily grind of ops, an operational squadron. You have to find ways to build quality time, because quantity, if you, sure, let's sit around all day and watch TV. Okay. But quality time, doing weekend trips with your boys.
Yeah.
Or, taking your daughter for a weekend trip, building little rituals that you guys do. Once my boys turned, it kind of depended on their maturity level, but 12 to 14, I did a weekend trip with each of them. And we talked about stuff, and then with Danny and Senna, when they were getting older, every summer before school started, we'd go do a little staycation over in Scottsdale at a resort for 2 or 3 days. And we'd have conversations about, hey, what's the next school year look like? What's your guys' goals? We do some goal planning for them and stuff, so just, and there's things that you can do like that help you build that connection and understanding and all of those things, but you have to be intentional about it.
I was having this talk with a couple of guys at work a while back about, I had all boys, so sports was always something that we could rally around. They're all very athletic and sporty type people. And I coached them for a lot of years. And so that was always a common ground, still is a common ground for us to come together and at least start a conversation, and it gets us talking and gets us going, and always inevitably leads to something else, But what about girl dads who their girls aren't into sports and things that, we would maybe consider more masculine than feminine or something like that. And a lot of my girl dad bros said, well, we find things like they got into the Marvel cinematic universe, and they started watching all the movies and dissecting the characters. And, before they know it, they got poster boards out where they're making maps and stuff, and so the point is find that point of connection and foster that. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it sucks, but I think as the parent, that responsibility oftentimes falls on us, because as the kids get a little bit older, preteens, mid-teens, late teens, they're going to be pulled in so many different directions from their social circles that you want them to want to come back home, I think is probably the end goal. At least it was for us. We want our kids to know what we want our kids to want to come home. And they still do. Our kids, I think, really look forward to coming to mom and dad's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I think I would say is, just we've talked about this on the podcast, like Brene Brown says, right? We're hardwired for connection. Relationships are important, and fortifying relationships is what's going to give you meaning in your life, whether that's friends, whether that's a significant other, whatever the case may be. This is hard, but dude, you got to learn how to be emotionally available to your significant other, right? You have to learn how to be vulnerable you have to have a little courage over comfort.
Yeah.
And, share with your significant other what your fears are, what your concerns are, what you're worried about, whether that's at work or in your relationship, or like be authentic with them. And you know what? If they don't want to hear it, then you probably need to look for somebody else, because they're probably not going to turn out to be a good partner in the long run. Or there's a lot of growth that needs to happen on both sides of the fence, one of the two. But being emotionally available, like you were talking about, coming home and your wife needs to talk about something, and you just had a 14-hour day, and you're like, oh Jesus, or your one of your kids, your daughter or your son, they're having some emotional roller coaster at school, and you're like, this is the last thing I want to do right now is spend an hour listening to this. But dude, it's just part of the biz, and you've got to just take a deep breath, breathe through your nose, not through your mouth.
Get the Belvani out of the cabinet.
Get yourself in the right mind space and run with it. So
no, that's cool. In prep for this show, I read a couple articles, but I watched a couple of YouTube videos where this guy went around and just interviewed a bunch of older people, 55 and older type people, all the way up to like 90 years old. And one of the sections is about a 5-minute section where he interviewed a lot of elderly couples and was asking them kind of like, so how long you been married? Oh, 52 years or something like that. Holy shit, man. Well, what's the secret? You've obviously got all this experience now. What are you taking away from it? And one of the big takeaways or one of the things that I wrote down was, dude, sometimes it just ain't worth it. Sometimes she's having a bad day and she's going to yell and she's going to scream, and you just say, okay.
Yeah.
And it's not worth, getting in this big, huge fight about. And then one guy says, yeah, I mean, you're going to fight, you're going to argue. And sometimes you just scream at each other and then you go make dinner. It's like, it's not a big deal, So sometimes it's healthy to get that stuff out of your system, but sometimes it's just not worth engaging.
Yeah. A certain amount of conflict in relationships is healthy, right? And as long as you can come to understanding around that stuff.
Well, we talked a lot about, spouses and marital type relationships, but what about just like your circle of friends, and one of the things that I wrote down out of those interviews was one of the elderly guys said, stay in touch with as many people as you can, just even if it's just once a year, calling a guy and having a 10-minute conversation with him, because a lot of these elderly people, they got to that point in their life where they were starting to get lonely, and before you know it, if you haven't experienced it already, you're going to one day, some of your friends are going to start passing away.
Yeah.
You're going to lose some of them. And that's a pretty sad time, man. And I watched my grandmother, both of her sons died, her husband died, all of her friends died, and she was left a very lonely woman, and I tried to, call her every now and then, but it just wasn't the same once I joined the Air Force. But I think as you get older, that was a solid takeaway for me, was try to foster as many relationships as you can and stay in touch with people.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think it varies the number, but based on whether maybe you're an introvert or an extrovert. But in me being more introverted, My circle is pretty small.
Yeah.
But inside of that circle, I'm in touch with those people on a regular basis. Even if
That-
it's just a text exchange going, "Hey brother, how's things going?
Yeah,
What are you guys
that's
up to
valid.
right now?"
That's valid. And there's also a balance in there between what I call emotional equity and how much you're going to invest into a relationship before you realize it's a bad investment and you move on. And we've all been there. We've all had relationships that we thought were a good investment, and then you find out that the other party is. I think it was Stephen F. Covey in How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he talked about, he used the analogy of an emotional bank account. And if you're constantly depositing into this account, but the other party is
just
always withdrawing, then that's not a good investment, man. And maybe you need to move on from that and maybe foster a different relationship. But
yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. What else you got?
That's it. Let's move on to number 2, if you're good with that.
Yeah.
All right. The second one was good health and self-care have to become priorities before it's too late.
Fucking huge.
This is huge. The bottom line is that far too often as men, I think we disregard our bodies and our mental health until we face something drastic or some traumatic event in life.
You're either going to pay for your health now or you're going to pay for it later.
Right.
That's just fucking reality, man. It's math. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And be careful too, because some of the habits that you pick up when you're in your 20s and you carry into your 30s and 40s are going to make you a very unhealthy person when you hit your 40s and 50s. So you have to be aware of that. And this is also why self-awareness is so important. Because let's be honest, we're taught to tough it out, push through, get it done. And guess what? It's fucking life. Sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes you got to just
have to do that.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we often abuse our own physical limits and mental health in the pursuit of goals. So a lot of guys, like, think about it in the fighter squadron, right? For much of my fighter squadron career, I was not a very healthy eater because I subsisted on, a can of Skull, Jack and Coke.
Give me a Snickers bar and a handful of popcorn. And I'm good.
And a bunch of jalapeno corn. And that is basically what I ate for 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then I'd come home and have a dinner, or, maybe I'd spoil myself one day because I had enough time for 30 minutes to run out and get lunch, or something. But
I just told you the story about me getting ready to go to OTS, where I had to basically starve myself to get my waist measurement down so that I got max points on my PT test. And my mom goes to my OTS graduation and says, "Dude, you look like a Holocaust victim," because I just shriveled up. I was tremendously unhealthy and malnourished, but that's what I had to do to get the Strike Eagles that I wanted to, to get in that fighter cockpit. I knew what measures were out there that I had to meet, and that was one of them. And I mean, I did what I had to do, but holy crap, it was not the right thing.
Just the opposite for me, man. When I went to weapons school,
happens all the time.
15, 20 pounds on,
you see guys come back to the squadron after 6 months at Nellis and they're like, who the fuck is that?
I know, right? Because I had no time to work out, or at least I didn't prioritize time to work out. I ate like crap, drank a bunch. It was horrible.
Okay. Let me ask you this. So if you could go back to that period in your life and you're going to weapons school, like you show up and you knock on the door at weapons school the first day and they give you your badge, welcome CAS, come on in. Do you think you would have prioritized that a little bit more back then?
Definitely.
Was there time in your day? Could you legit say, you know what, I could notch out 45 minutes a day?
Oh yeah. Well, I at least could have notched out, 4 or 5 days out of the week to do that. And it would have been a much healthier outlet and better for me than drinking.
I mean, it's
on
so
Friday
good for your physical and mental
Saturday
health
night, or in debriefs, it's hard because you have really long days, you don't really get much time off because on the days you do have off, you're working on your weapons school paper, you're doing
or next week's flights,
or next week's your mission planning or studying or whatever. Right. And so the grind is pretty consistent there. And there's a lot of sleepless nights because, you've got these huge sorties the next day that you're planning for, and you try to go to bed at night and all that's swirling around in your mind is, that I cover all the contingencies? What happens if this happens?
But what if you would have taken that? What if you would have taken 30 minutes out of that?
Dude, I totally could have.
You're in your dorm room and you're just bogged down and you're going over all these contingencies in your brain. You know what? Fuck it, dude. I'm going to put on some Motley Crue and my headphones and I'm going to go out for a jog, dude.
Especially now, it's a lot easier now because the phones we have, YouTube, all those different things. I mean, you could do yoga in your room for 30 minutes and be better off than most of the stuff that I did while I was at weapons school. But, definitely. I could have, and I would have, I would have prioritized that much differently.
Yeah. See, going back to kind of the opening of the podcast, where this is the show that we wish we'd have had when we were younger, you know, we both fell into that trap where we misprioritize things, and you get so myopically focused on this one thing that you think is just super duper important. But it's that 3-legged stool analogy, man. Mind, body, soul, dude.
Yeah.
One of those things gets out of balance, the whole fucking thing topples over, and you end up gaining 30 pounds and going back to your fighter squadron with, you know.
And, you know, if you're a younger man, you might be able to look at your dad or just older guys around you in the industry that you're in. And what do you typically see, right? Guys in their 40s and 50s subsisting on caffeine and nicotine or fast food, you know.
Hey, I resemble that remark. Hang on.
30 or 40 pounds overweight, you know, drinking, you know, big pop Diet Cokes 4 times a day or whatever. It's a Diet Coke, so it's okay, right? You know, like they're just feeding their body all this shit. And it leads to medical issues, right? Diabetes, you know, being overweight, unhealthy heart stuff, all kinds of issues, you know, like with cholesterol and blood pressure. And that's why so many people are. And so that's the point, right? Is if you don't learn how to prioritize these things early in life, then in your middle age, these negligent behaviors will come back to haunt you. In medical issues, weight gain, addiction, burnout, declining energy levels, insomnia. I mean, it's CPAC stuff all the time, you know, for people that have issues with that. And on the mental health side of it, an inability to regulate yourself emotionally, you know, because if you don't find ways to mitigate stress in your life and to handle that stuff, dude, at some point, we've talked about this before too, right? The cup holds only so much, and at some point it boils over. And when it boils over, it's usually not pretty.
Yeah.
So,
dude, I was on the way over here this morning. I was listening to a podcast, and it was two doctors were talking, and one of them was like a microbiologist or something like that, or nutritionist or whatever she was. But they were focusing on your muscle and skeletal health and how important that is. And they were talking about the things that you do in your 20s are going to affect you in your 60s. And one of the, I mean, this is proven, this is science, this is all over the fucking internet. If you guys go to WebMD and you can read about this shit, right? But one of the best things that you can do for yourself is some sort of strength training. And I don't mean that you got to go to the gym and be a fucking meathead and drink protein shakes all day. Drop down and do a few push-ups, man. Do some planks. You know,
do some sit-ups.
You can crush yourself with just body weight exercise. Ask me how I know. And if you build up a tolerance to that, like I've built up a little bit of a tolerance to that. So I bought a weighted vest and I go walking with my weighted vest, and it gives me just enough resistance to get my heart rate up a little bit. I'm still out getting some sunshine and fresh air, man. There's so many ways that you can do this where you don't have to buy a gym membership.
No. Yeah. And you know, so your heart's a muscle, you got to exercise it. And when you get to my age, 50, if you hadn't built muscle in your 20s, 30s, 40s, it becomes really difficult to build it now, right? I mean, in fact, you have to I have to find routines. I'm in the place in my life at the gym where I'm just trying to maintain the muscle mass that I have. I'm not crushing anything anymore, trying to build muscle. I'm just trying to hold on to what I got.
We're not in there trying to bench 2 plates or anything like that.
I'm at the place in my life where there's certain exercises I don't do anymore.
for me, man, and you know, I'm at a place where I need my body to be able to do the things I want it to do. If I want to go hiking one day and go put in 10 miles in the mountains, and then the next day go to Six Flags, and then the next day go walk around downtown, I need my body to be able to handle that stuff, you know, and you have to treat it appropriately. You have to be good to yourself and still eat, you know, decently. And we've talked about the 5 salads and stuff, and you can go in, you can do all the research on the protein intakes and all that. But bottom line is, guys, do some exercise, move your body a little bit. Your body is built for movement. And one of the best things that you can do, your body was made to walk. Just go walking. If that's all you can do, just go walk around your neighborhood, man. Put on a good book or put on a good podcast or something, and you'll get some fresh air and sunshine. You'll be amazed at how good you feel afterwards.
Yeah, and just like we've talked about with everything else, right? If you're out of shape, overweight, and you're listening to this podcast, start small.
Yeah,
exactly. Right? Go out and walk a half a mile and do that for a couple of weeks, and then bump it up to a mile. You know, and then just go. Don't go, okay, well, I'm going to the gym and I'm going to go kill myself for an hour and a half and try to run 3 miles. Your body will revolt so hard against you, you'll never want to go back.
I got Katie to buy a weighted vest the other day.
Did you?
Yeah.
Nice.
She went on, she's seen what I've been doing with mine. Cause I mean, I do full up workouts with it. I get back there and I got a couple of kettlebells that I'll go throw around, and I'll go jogging with it occasionally. It's really hard on my knee joints to do that, so I don't do it very often, but I take it to the gym with me and get on the elliptical. And I mean, you can crush yourself with just 20 extra pounds.
Yes, you can.
But she bought her one and went out for a walk the other day. And she goes, holy crap, I didn't
Makes a
realize.
difference.
And she only got 10 pounds. She got a 10 pound, she got 10 pounds worth of plates. And then the vest is about 3 pounds itself. But it just adding that little bit of resistance, it's good for you, man.
Yeah.
And if you're starting to get things like bad posture or your shoulders are drooped or something like that, think about what that's going to be in 20 years, how much more amplified that's going to be. So doing something like pull-ups or walking with a weighted vest or anything that you can do to improve that and improve your posture and your skeletal health.
Yeah.
You're going to get to a point. How many times do we read or do we see old people fell, broke their hips, or old people fell, broke their wrists, something like that? Well, you can do things now in your younger age that can help prevent some of that stuff. Or, I mean, you're going to fall, but maybe it's not going to be as catastrophic as if you didn't do anything. If you live a sedentary life and you fall, your wrist is going to snap.
Sure.
But if you exercise regularly and you have good grip strength and you take care of your body and you eat decently and don't feed a bunch of shit into your body, when you do fall, maybe you just sprain your wrist instead of break your wrist.
Well, and stretching is really important too, right? Maintaining a certain amount of flexibility because it prevents injury and it prevents things like that. If you fall or trip or something like that happens, it'll help prevent any kind of serious injury. The bottom line is, brother, you always talk about mind, body, soul balance, and that's what we're getting after, right? So, and the quicker you figure that out, boys, the better off you're going to be when you get older, because you're going to be able to carry those practices, that discipline, and that vitality into your older age. You're going to be in a much better position than most people your age will be.
Go to your weapons school example again. That's probably one of the harder things to do in any career, is to go through a program like that, where it is, it takes everything you've got. And we've all experienced that on some level and it's not the same for everyone. It's one person's threshold is going to be different than another person's threshold, but doing something as simple as, like you said, if you could go back and do it again, go for that 45-minute walk, dude.
Yeah. Well, and I'm telling you guys this because I was fat Cass for a while, man. I was, in my late 20s, early 30s, I was fat Cass. I was 20 pounds, 30 pounds overweight of where I probably needed to be, and not in good shape, and not eating well, and not taking care of my body or myself mentally very well. And I was just busting my ass, and looking back on that period of my life now, I could have done so much better if I would have just been more disciplined like I am now about how I approached it.
Yeah. Well, I bet this is going to lead nicely into another topic that you have. It might not be the next one on your list, but when you prioritize things like your profession to that extent, know that one day you're going to have to hang them up.
Yep.
Even the greats have to hang them up someday, right? And your seat is going to be filled before it cools off.
That's right.
So in the end, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
You got a lot of accolades and you got some cool shit hanging on the walls, but look back on it, man. If you would have gone for that run for 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week, would it really made that much of a difference in your profession over a 20-year career? You know what I mean? So guys, take time out for yourself, because one day you're going to leave that company, or you're going to leave that business, or you're going to leave that job, and they're going to fill your seat before it even cools off.
That's right.
They don't give a fuck about you.
Yeah.
So focus on you, man.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue into number 3 that he talks about, which is time with friends and family is more valuable than work and money.
Holy shit. It's like I fucking read the notes or something.
It's like you knew. So some of the things that he talks about in that section is just that, in our prime professional years, kind of your 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, a lot of men become consumed by chasing promotion, accolades, accumulating wealth and assets.
Yeah.
We chase the rabbit, right? What are we supposed to have?
Of course.
We're supposed to have the nice car, the nice house, blah, 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 blah. We rationalize missing things, family events, important occasions with friends, vacations, because our job demands, right? Things like that. And again, that's that quality over quantity time. The bottom line is, dudes, you don't get time back.
Yeah.
Time you lose, time you waste, you're never going to get it back.
That's the one thing that won't regenerate,
nope,
man.
It moves forward, whether you use it appropriately or not. And when I was reading this, I was thinking about, my dad had an affair when I was 12. He left the house when I was 15. And I was really upset with my dad. I didn't do a lot to foster that relationship until I probably got into my mid-20s. And even then, it was kind of. And to be honest, I don't know if my dad was ever had the emotional capacity to kind of have the relationship that maybe I would have always wanted to have with him, but he was always willing to have a relationship with me to the point that he could,
Yeah.
or that he was capable of, right? And I missed a lot of time with my dad.
Yeah. Time is shit you can't get back, right?
And I'll never get it back.
Yeah.
And he passed away back in 2011. Was it 2010?
Mm.
I can't remember, 2010 or 2011. In the last couple years that he was alive, he'd shown up for me in a lot of ways. I was going through my
Yeah.
divorce. He came down and stayed with me in Monterey when I was going to Naval Postgraduate School, and I was a single father. And helped me do stuff with the kids and take care of things. And that's time I can never replace or get back. And so,
dude, I told you about that movie, Finest Kind.
Yeah.
Katie and I watched it the other day, and Tommy Lee Jones plays this really old, beat up, weathered man. He's a Northeastern fisherman. And that was one of the subplots of the whole movie, was kind of his character arc. Was you could tell that he had a lot of friction with his son, divorced his mom at a very young age, and they just kind of grew up with this friction between them. But in the end, kind of in the denouement of that was a big word. I think it's French.
That was a big word. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. I read it once. But anyways, towards the end of the movie, there's kind of this peak in the thing where the father comes to save the day, kind of thing. Despite the friction in the relationship, he comes to save the day, and the son's sitting there with him going like, dude, what the fuck? And he goes, man, here's the thing, right? You live, you die. It's what you do in the middle that really matters, right? And when your kids are born, you realize in that moment, that you would die for this little tiny football-sized human. You would die for that person. Now, I maybe that's a little bit of a drastic way to put it, and obviously this is a drama and everything, but I think it categorizes or summarizes what we're talking about here. Like, despite all the friction and things, that guy, in the end, he realized what matters. Now, unfortunately, it took him till he was a very old man dying of cancer to get to that.
Yeah.
Would have been really cool if he'd got to that in his 30s and
Which
maybe
is why we're
mended
having
that
this conversation, right?
Exactly. but that's kind of the point, and I said up front, we're going to talk about old people. Well, we're talking about things that elderly people have listed as, man, if I could go back and do things just a little bit different, this is one of them. Maybe resolve that friction point earlier, and foster that relationship like you're talking about.
Yeah. To the extent of the emotional equities piece that you brought up, I think is important as well. But the bottom line is, you or I, or for the listeners, if you close your eyes for a couple of minutes and think about your fondest memories, I guarantee you the majority of those are going to be things that you've done with family or friends,
probably.
or loved ones, right? Like the fondest memories that you can recollect about the best times in your life or the best things are going to be something related to relationships that you have with people, not the trophies on the wall.
Well, how about this? How about when you went TDY somewhere, you went on a deployment, and I did this when we would go to Vegas for like these really long 6-week type deals, and maybe we'd go out to Red Rocks and go hiking or go up to Mount Charleston or something like that. And I couldn't help but every time I would go out there, be like, man, I really wish Katie was here to experience this with me.
Absolutely.
She would really enjoy this.
Yeah.
This would be a really cool moment for
I
us.
do that now on trips. I'm on
Yeah.
trips and I'm like, I'm in a city maybe that I haven't been in before. And I'm like, man, I need to bring Alicia back.
Yeah.
We could have a lot of fun.
Yeah. See,
so
that shared experience, I think, fostering that. Yeah. That'd be
absolutely.
cool.
And unless you're a fucking sociopath, we're hardwired for connection.
Yeah. Well, even those guys they go about it a weird way.
Yeah. And that's not to say forego the career, right? Like, I get the fact that careers enable our livelihoods. You and I are perfect examples of that. And the work that we put in younger can help set us up for success down the road, being financially stable for our families, helping our kids get through college, whatever the case may be. But again, dude, it comes back to finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
And between professional ambition and creating and maintaining meaningful relations and the bonds in life that are really the value that life provides for us, right?
Make no mistake, you're going to have to do the work, right? And there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. Some of the things that I pulled out of the interviews that I was watching was chase your passions.
Yeah.
Chase something that makes you happy. And then you don't feel like you're grinding all the time.
Yeah.
You're actually enjoying it. So you come home in a better mood. And now your relationship with your people in your house are going to be better because you're not bringing home that anger or that angst or that friction that you had in your workday, you know? So find your passion and let everything else just kind of fall into place sometimes, you know?
Yeah. And if I had to close on anything related to this particular topic, what I would say to guys is there's always going to be more work to do.
Yeah.
There's always another deal to close. There's always another rank to reach.
Yeah.
There's always another accolade to get.
Balance, man.
But you know what, dude? This may be the last chance that I get to tell you that I love you and you're my brother and I value our relationship.
Yeah, you never know.
Because I could have a heart attack this afternoon and be gone.
I got to drive home. And have you driven out to Whitman lately?
Yeah,
It's
I know.
scary
Well,
as fuck.
Arizona in general, right? But that's my point, right? So just be mindful and intentional about where you're placing your time and your energy and your effort. And try to find as much balance in that as you can.
Yeah. I would say don't focus on money. We all fall into that trap at some point, you know. I mean, we got kind of screwed in the military game because it's kind of laid out in front of you, you know. But for those of you guys who are chasing some kind of ladder or chasing some kind of paycheck or whatever, I would say maybe turn towards happiness instead of money. And you know, there's that old joke where money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy me a boat. And a boat makes me really happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, focus. I say focus on happiness, man, and try to find those things in your life that bring you joy and put some balance to it. And here's that big old knot. In order to find some of those things, maybe you need to take some time out, go to the mountains, walk around in the woods a little bit, you know, ground yourself.
Well, that's a self-awareness piece, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Spend some time between your ears and try to figure out what really makes you happy. If it's your family, spend more time with your family.
Well, and again, this is why the self-awareness piece is so important, because you have to find out internally what's important to you. And you have to, because once you can do that, then all the external noise doesn't fucking matter. And here's a perfect example of that. I can't tell you. So in the airline industry, guys make a lot of money and have a potential to make a lot of money. And I fly with some captains who are just doing that, chasing that carrot, right? I got to have the big house in the premier, you know, neighborhood in Scottsdale. And I got to have, you know, the $1 million+ house. I got to be driving a brand new $70,000 pickup truck. I got to have all the new beeps and squeaks and toys. Oh, by the way, I'm on my 3rd flight attendant marriage, you know, blah, 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 blah. And they have all this shit.
Yeah.
And they're busting their ass to pay for it all, you know, working way harder than they need to, flying way more than they need to, you know. And then you run into some captains who, like, there was this one captain I flew with. It's just he and his wife. They don't have any kids. They have a small townhouse because they don't need anything bigger. They don't want to do yard work. They don't want to do. They have so much fucking money, dude. They traveled the world. Yeah. You know, and that's what they enjoy.
They found happiness.
But but they took the time to go, what's really important to us? Where do we really want to spend our money? Or like, what's the value for us?
Well, now this is, you know,
and don't worry about, am I the prototypical captain with the $1 million+ home and blah, 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 blah. Right.
Well, this is us sitting here at 50-ish years old, you know, talking about and giving advice about this stuff. But dude, we fell into that same trap.
Oh, sure.
You know, and we were just talking about this yesterday about, you know, what's the end game look like? What's the next 10? What is your 10-year plan? And we have a number, or we have a feeling, or we have a date, you know, and you know, I have my own personal financial goals and I'm working my way to get there. But that came at a cost early on, you know. Sure. So this isn't to say, you know, what we're saying is, you know, if you like painting pictures, don't go sit in the park and paint pictures all day, because you might not find a way to pay your rent.
Right.
So there is balance. There's balance there somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe you can take, if you're painting pictures, maybe you can find a line of work as a graphic artist, or something like that. You know, find yourself making signs for company X that they hang out on the billboards on the interstate or something. You know, make enough money to pay your rent, and then when you go home at night, you draw your pictures of flowers.
And obviously, based on the stuff that we've talked about with optimal performance and how to perform well in discipline, and you know, we want you to do well at work. Like, we're not saying don't go to work and do a good job and spend all, but you've got to find that balance. That's all we're saying.
I have a really good friend whose daughter was into drawing. She's a phenomenal artist. she won a bunch of contests when she was growing up through, school and high school and whatnot. And so art was her passion. She loved drawing and creating, and she loved that piece of it. And she became a tattoo artist.
Yeah.
And now she's got her own business and she's doing great.
Yeah.
So that's a opportunity to take your passion that you love doing and turn it into something that pays the rent.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't easy for her. It took her a lot of years to grow that business, and she had to pay her dues working for someone else to get her portfolio and make her name and all that. But once she got to a point, she goes, you know what? I'm out. Here's my own thing.
Yeah.
I've got my own book of drawings here.
Yeah. Yep. And at the end of the day, just don't totally forgo the relationships that are going to be important to you down the road for, the accolades or the promotion or what you can do at work.
Don't burn a bridge. Don't close the door.
That's right. Okay, moving on to number 4, he talks about emotional intelligence and communication matter. Emotional intelligence is a buzzword that most people don't really probably understand what the fuck it means, right? And there's 4 domains to emotional intelligence. We're not going to get into that right now. We are going to do either a podcast or a series of podcasts to try to explain this to the listeners at some point this year. But the bottom line is a lot of men move through life suppressing emotions, right? We're supposed to be tough. We're not supposed to show emotion. Avoiding difficult conversations, and lacking the language to express psychological needs or ask for help. And we've talked about that, right? If you need help, dude, ask for help. And that's exactly why we talk about these things on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So bottling up feelings, going it alone, thinking you're responsible for carrying the burden is an easy way to burn yourself out and prevent you from having intimate connections in life. So by choosing not to be honest in communication, you're only going to breed resentment when your needs go unmet, and it's going to harm relationships, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be the fucking dude in a relationship where the person that's with you has to try to guess what you need. Just fucking tell them what you need, dude.
Constantly doing this, trying to,
Because all you're going to do is breed resentment in them, because it's not their responsibility to figure it the fuck out if you can't express it to them correctly. And you're going to get resentful too, because you're going to sit here going, well, I kind of made a comment that's, she should have figured it out, and then you're going to get resentful because your needs are going unmet. So just fucking talk about it. Knock it the fuck off and be honest.
Do you know who Rodney Carrington is?
I don't think so.
Rodney Carrington's a comedian from back in the day. I used to listen to him. He's from Texas or Oklahoma or something. Anyways, funny as shit. But he was talking about it kind of on communication with him and his wife. And he's talking about having sex with his wife or lack thereof or whatnot. And she goes, well, I told you I wanted to have sex the other day. And he goes, when? She goes, when I touched your foot.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's not that. And I get on to Katie about that all the time. She'll do some little thing, and then a week later, I'll be like, and she goes, well, I touched your hand when you were in the kitchen. What the? That doesn't no. Be overt about it sometimes. This hidden fucking code that you got going on. I don't know what that means.
Well, and I'll tell you this, man. My first marriage, that was a huge part as to why it ended. We did not have great communication.
Yeah.
And there was an expectation, at least I felt there was an expectation for me to figure out what she was thinking or what she wanted. And all that ended up breeding in me at the end of the day was fucking resentment.
Yeah.
Where I'm just, cause I would do something and it wouldn't get the physical or emotional response that I was looking for. And then I'm like, fuck, well, that wasn't it. And now I'm trying to, and it'll burn you out instead of just going, what the fuck do you need? And so the bottom line, you guys, is communication matters. And we've talked about having courage over comfort, finding those people that you can trust to be vulnerable and transparent with. Because like we've already talked about, later in life, social bonds are going to carry greater meaning for you. And if you don't figure out how to be emotionally available or authentic, you're not going to be able to create, long lasting, good, nurturing relationships with folks. And it goes back to what you were talking about, right? And then you're going to be that fucking 80-year-old dude in the retirement home who's sitting in front of his TV all day, drinking beer, watching Fox News.
Yeah. And
the greatest love in your life is that fucking cat or dog on your lap because you don't have any friends.
Yeah. That's one of my big fears, man, is I don't want to end up a grumpy, lonely old man. I want to be that guy that you see out running the trail. When I did that White Tanks half marathon last year, one of the guys that I ran with was 70 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I'm 40 something and he's 70 and he and I are running together, and we got to the end. I was like, dude, like, I want to be you when I grow up.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there drinking our recovery drinks and eating our bananas and whatnot. And we talked for like 20 minutes in the parking lot, sitting there just chilling. And he says, yeah, he says, start now doing these things, keep this up, because when you get to where I'm at, it's almost too late to do that. Like, you need to start young doing these things so that when you're at the end, but he's out there socializing. As I thought about it, and as I watched him after our conversation was over, he's walking around talking to all these people and everything. He's having a blast, and so he had a lot of, I don't know. He seemed to be very happy at 70 years old. And you see this, I see it when I go to Lowe's and I talk to people, talk to the older guys over there, and they're like, man, this is perfect, dude. I worked a career my whole life, but I come in here for 4 hours. I drink coffee. I walk around. I talk to people. I'm getting connection with dudes. I'm communicating with people. I learn stuff every now and then, and I'm getting my exercise walking around the store.
Yeah.
And then I go home and I fuck off with my wife all day.
Yeah.
So what a great thing. I wanted to read you this thing. So not necessarily a shameless plug, but my book, Work Hard, Don't Suck. One of the first chapters, if not the first chapter, is the 3 keys to a successful marriage: money, communication, and sex. That's the way I broke it down. That's the way Katie and I have always framed it. And it doesn't necessarily mean intercourse. When I say sex, it means intimacy with you and your partner. But this is a review, 5-star review on my book from my oldest son. So this one actually almost brought a tear to my eye. Work Hard, Don't Suck is a well-written book that gives anybody or could be struggling with life lessons. I personally like the 3 keys to a healthy relationship: money, communication, and sex. Just like in the book title, it may sound eerie, yet there is way more depth behind the meaning of the 3 keys. There's many things to learn and take from the book. Highly recommended. So when my 27-year-old, who has just gone through a really bad breakup, when he can realize and he can look at that and say, man, these 3 things, if I can keep these in balance, maybe my next relationship doesn't end up like this first one did.
Yeah.
And number one of them was communication.
Yeah.
Like, you have to talk about things, and sometimes it's uncomfortable and sometimes it sucks. But one of the things that we've always fostered in our house, Katie and I, even with our kids, and they know this to be true to this day, nothing is off limits in our house. We're going to talk about it. We're going to throw it on the table, talk about it, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah.
It's like non-retribution. If you did something really heinous, there's going to be some price to pay potentially. Sure. But, if you go out and killed a guy, come home and talk to me about it. But we were probably going to have to call the cops, you know what I'm saying? So, but you got to talk about these things, man.
Yeah, you do.
And that emotional piece of it, I think men, there is a difference between bottled up and what you're talking about, suppressing emotions and being stoic. I think there's a big difference there. Stoicism is not the same as repressing your emotions.
Yeah.
I think stoicism is controlling your emotions versus repressing them or suppressing them, I should say.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a big difference between regulating your emotions and, being able to, if you, again, have done some self-awareness or self-inspection work and you know what your triggers are, being able to recognize a trigger, and before you go right into reaction mode, take that space in between to go, okay, how do I need to respond to this?
Between stimulus and response, there's a space.
That's right. Or do I even need to fucking respond to it?
That's right.
Because sometimes you don't, right? And so that's, to me, that's stoicism. That's good emotional regulation.
That's exactly right.
Versus, I'm not going to share how I feel. I'm not going to share what my frustrations are. I'm not going to share what my concerns are, whether it's in a relationship or things that I'm dealing with at work. And I'm just going to come home pissed off. My wife's going to have no idea what the fuck's going on, and I'm not going to share it with her. And then and guess what she's doing in her mind? Her mind starts racing. It's like, okay, what the hell's going on? Blah, 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 blah. What did I do? Right. And then boom, dude, you're just going to end up pissing each other off and in a really bad spot down the road. So just, again,
reaction versus response. Yep. Reactions are oftentimes subjective and maybe don't have an entirely good or whole grasp on the whole picture, whereas a response is more measured, it's more quantifiable, it's more objective. And that's the difference between, I think, what we're talking about. You know, the Stoics of the world, the guys who can keep their shit together when you just heard something that's very inflammatory or something like that. It definitely, I mean, like your face may turn red, but you don't have to lash out.
Yeah.
You know, you can take a pause, take that space that Viktor Frankl talked about, take that space for just a second.
That's right.
And let that response happen naturally. And this is a recent example. You know, I like to talk about my failures on this podcast to prove that we're not superhuman or anything. I fuck this up all the time. I do pretty good job of keeping my anger in check. Men in my family have a decent amount of anger issues, I think. They've been known to fly off the handle, turn red in the face, throw shit, break shit, whatever. And I've done pretty good at recognizing that at an early age. And I don't yell at my kids a lot. I've never yelled at Katie. I've never called her a bad name. Definitely never put my hands on any of them. The other night we came home from the Rose Bowl and we walked into the house. It's like 2:15, 2:30 in the morning. And, I just drove 6 hours from LA or Pasadena. And so I'm sitting on the couch, just kind of winding down a little bit before I go try to get some sleep. And I was sitting on my couch and I happened to look down at my recliner, and the reclining handle on my recliner was like bent out at about a 45-degree angle. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. And so I sat in my recliner, and when I went to go recline and kick the feet out, the handle came off in my hand. It had sheared off inside there. After the day that we just had, Bama lost the game. Long drive home in the dark. I lost my shit. I started yelling, "You little motherfuckers." And I went up, and nobody in the house was up except for me and Katie. But then I saw Colin in the kitchen fixing his breakfast. He was getting ready to go to the airport. And I threw that handle at the couch, and I'm lucky I didn't hit that big ass picture window in the back of my house. But later on, I got a call from Nikki. So Colin had kind of had one of those, "Oh, Dad's pissed," kind of moments. And he texted all of them, go, "I don't know what happened, but Dad's fucking pissed."
Yeah.
Well, Nikki calls me and says, "Yeah, the dog broke it. He jumped on the back of it, whatnot." And I was like, "Hey, no harm, no foul. I overreacted for sure. My fault. Long day. I did not handle that situation well."
Yeah.
So if I could go back in time, I would hold that handle in my hand, count to 10, and probably put it down and go to bed.
Well, dude, flip side of that, like just on the communication piece, that's something that I've really had to work on in personal relationships, because as I've gone through my own process of self-awareness, I'm an internalizer.
Yeah.
And I'm in my head a fucking lot. And I don't share stuff very often.
You're kind of a quiet dude.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty quiet, kind of even keel cat. And I have to be very aware of that sometimes and communicate what's going on for me with Alicia, so that she doesn't have that record playing in her head about, okay, what's going on? Is there something I did, this, that, or the other? So I've had to learn how to be very intentional about that, because I wasn't really good at it for a very long time when I was in my 20s and probably early 30s. It's just something that I've really learned to do in the last 15 years or so. So
on the flip side,
and I still fuck it up.
On the flip side, though, sometimes I have to make myself just grit my teeth and not say anything. Sometimes silence is the better play.
Yeah.
Because I've learned to be very measured with the words that I use, especially with those that are close to me, really close to me, because words are like bullets, man.
Yeah.
I mean, once they're out there, you can't take them back. And I don't want to inadvertently or unintentionally say something that I either didn't mean or that I can't take back, or, one of those heat of the moment type things. So again, go back to self-awareness and self-inspection, man. And what I was talking about, I've said this a few times on the podcast, you only have a moment to enjoy this moment. Well, you have to be in that moment to recognize some of these things.
Well, and we talked about it on our First Name Friday too. Like if you're in a place where things are getting heated, like it's okay to go
time out.
Let's
go to our corners.
I need 30 minutes and decompress a little bit.
Hey, go for that run.
Because we talked about that in that First Name Friday, where it was about relationships, and the Gottmans have found through their research that, 15 to 30 minutes is kind of what it takes for the brain and the stimulus that's happening in the brain to kind of cool off for you to be able to think logically again. The other thing too is, like I said, sometimes a response isn't required. How many times you get a text from somebody who may be upset with you and they're pissed, right? So they're looking for a reaction because they want to have that, for whatever reason, they want to have that engagement.
Delete.
Yeah. Or just, you know what? this does not require, this is
Yeah.
nothing pressing. Nobody's going to die. I don't need to, this does not require my attention right now.
Yeah.
And put it on pause for 24 or 48 hours.
Yeah. We've gone through that recently with some family members where we weren't ready to have the conversation that they wanted to have. And so we kind of kicked the can down the road for several months, actually, until we got to a place where we're like, okay, let's at least hear what they have to say. We may not fully engage on this, but let's at least hear what they have to say. And then, maybe here in a month or two, we can actually sit down and have the conversation that we need to have. We're just not ready to do that yet.
Yeah. And that's valid.
I want to take a little bit of a different spin on the communication piece of it. And let's talk specifically to this younger generation. We kind of hit on it the other day when we were talking about the work from home stuff, and not to make it like a vicious attack on the younger generations, but you need to have conversations.
Yeah.
You need to communicate. You need to talk to people and get out of this and stop living in the virtual world and start having experiences in the real world. Go talk to a complete stranger and develop that skill of being able to find common ground with anyone. You don't know how important it is to be able to sit across from another human being and hold a conversation.
Yeah.
I was
and
just
if you don't, you'll figure it out the first time you have to go for a job interview.
Seriously. When I was talking to Caleb about going back for his second semester, they just started their second semester the other day. And I said, dude, you're going to be put into a new flight, all new people to you, all strangers, all new flight commanders and everything. Stand up and introduce yourself the first day and let everybody know that Caleb he's a winner. He's a player. He's here to, make himself better and make you guys better by proxy. And on the first day they went out for PT and a guy beat him. I said, well, there's your challenge for the rest of it. So he went back and he had a conversation with the dude and it turns out the guy had been a runner or something in his past. And Caleb kind of didn't do shit over Christmas break. So yeah, he earned that L. But I know what his motivation is going to be.
Sure.
And they're going to end up laughing and joking and having fun. The point is, get up and talk to people, man. Get to know these people.
And there's a guy who you may be a good athlete, but you may not be fast when it comes to timed runs, which is what's important for the PT test in the Air Force. But a guy that's been a runner his whole life can tell you how to get there.
Yeah. Learn from him.
Can help you how to get there or help you to get there.
We start to kind of diverge into a little bit of the leadership stuff here, where my message to him was, you got a bunch of cats in your ROTC flight that aren't good at this stuff. Pick them up and take them with you, man.
Yeah, make them better.
Get them go to the gym. He did that with a couple of his buddies in his previous flight, and now those guys are like gym rats, man.
Yeah.
They're calling him saying, "Hey, man, we're going to the gym." So
that's perfect.
This is the effect you want to have on people. That's called inspiration. That's one of the pillars of the fucking B1 change.
Inspire change.
That's it.
Okay, and then the last thing he talks about is just it's never too late to start. And we say this all the time, right? If you're not going to start today, then fuck you.
Do it.
You're not going to start, right?
So don't put it on the calendar 6 months from now. Fucking do it today.
And you can do it at any age, right? Progress is one step away. You just got to start the process. So overcoming personal challenges and blind spots is fulfilling, provides a new sense of purpose, helps you figure things out, learn things about yourself. And then that allows you to figure out what your triggers are, your blind spots. Now you can start to emotionally regulate. Like it changes so much, dude. And don't be afraid to fail, right? Like we've always said on this podcast, failure is one of our greatest teachers. You're going to learn more when you fail than you do when you win sometimes. So step out, make mistakes, learn, find a mentor, get a therapist, read some books, do whatever it is that it works for you and start to figure some of these things out.
This little guy right here.
Yeah.
Every answer to any question that you could possibly have is right there.
Yeah.
Be careful the questions that you ask. If you're asking it, where to bury the body, then you're going to get flagged by somebody at Langley. But
the point is if you suck at something, figure out how to navigate it, man. Start doing some research, start reading about the topic, figure out how to navigate yourself, your relationships, work, relationships at work.
I would bet you my next paycheck, there's a YouTube video on all that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. And it all goes back to what we've talked about on this podcast a bunch of other times too, right? Which is that growth mindset. That's really what this comes down to is do you have a growth mindset or not? Right? We got to let go of old patterns and habits that we've been taught, especially when it goes back to family of origin and stuff, right? So family of origin is just those things that maybe you picked up from your parents that you don't even realize you do, or the belief system maybe that you were raised with that doesn't maybe really line up with who you are as a person or your own personal values, right? You're never going to shift away from any of that bullshit. I can think of a person in particular right now who hates their parents for the way that they raised them and operates exactly like their fucking parents.
Dude, be the one
with their children.
Right? Be the one that breaks that fucking cycle.
Yeah, that's
be the one that steps out away from that stuff. And this excuse of, well, that's just the way I've always been, or that's the way my daddy was, and I come by it honest.
Yeah,
dude, that's fucking bullshit, man. It is 100% bullshit.
Yeah,
you are in control of your own life.
That's
right. You are 100% in control. You can't tell me that because your daddy didn't work out that you can't put on your tennis shoes and go for a fucking walk.
Yeah.
That is bullshit, man. So get past that. Get over that. And whatever baggage you're dragging around with you and whoever you're blaming for your situation, stop that shit. You're not a fucking victim. Get up and make some fucking changes, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a little fired up.
No, it's
okay.
On that. That's the point, though, right? Challenge your beliefs, challenge your thoughts, challenge your viewpoints.
Yeah.
Question things, right? We live in this society right now where like you're not supposed to question things, especially in like the political realm. It's like Republican and Democrat. We don't listen to each other. We're not gonna accept information from each other, right? My way's right, your way's wrong. Everything's black and white. That's a bunch of bullshit, dude.
Yeah.
It is 50 Shades of Gray. Can I say that on the podcast? I don't even
Sure.
know. Whatever.
It's
probably a good book or movie. I never read it, but
it's fucking 50% your show, man. You can say whatever you want.
There you go. But recognize, dude, that especially if you're younger, a lot of the things that you were raised with may be completely fucking useless to you now.
Yeah.
To become the person that you want to be. So don't be afraid to challenge those things and shed them when you need to. You're not a finished project. You're never going to be done doing this.
Yeah. It's a continuous process.
It is
man.
A continuous process.
And you know what, though, when you get into it, if you'll just start, like people, seriously, if you'll just start, you'll find out that it's kind of fun.
It is.
And you're going to fuck things up and you're going to fail. And I just gave you 10 examples of things that I've messed up in the last couple of weeks, but that's okay. You try to learn from it and you say, if that situation comes up again, maybe I'll handle that a little bit differently. That's called being self-aware.
Yeah.
And so these things that we're talking about, guys, you can start our demographics that we're looking at for the podcast right now. We have a spread from about 75 years old down to about 18 years old. Like there's all matter. I had a guy that I was talking to at work the other day who wants his 12-year-old son to listen to our podcast. I advised him against it.
Yeah.
You
swear too much.
Maybe find some other, he needs to grow into this one a little bit. So, and that was why the language is probably not meant for a 12-year-old, but look at the demographic that we're covering, man. We're covering like what is that math in public? 60 something years, 60-ish years of people there. And so we got 75-year-olds that are listening. We got 18-year-olds that are listening. Dude, 75-year-olds, you older guys that are listening out there, some of our old retired bros that are, kind of our age or maybe just slightly older that are listening to this. You can start this now.
Yeah.
You can do this. I just started like 2 or 3 years ago. Yesterday, we were sitting in this room talking about, Cass, you're further along on this journey than I am. I've only been doing this for 2 or 3 years, so I'm playing catch up on a lot of these topics. And it's challenged. This podcast challenges me to get into the books and to read some of this stuff. And sometimes I fucking hate it, but I do it, right?
Yeah.
And my journey, I'm a couple of years down the road from where Katie is. And we talk about that and how, there's things that in my mindset, where my mindset is and my mental toughness, she's just not there yet. And that's okay. Because you're on your own journey and it's never too late to start.
Yeah, it's never too late to start. That's just it. And every day's fleeting, right? You get a finite amount of time to make yourself who you want to be. And so take the opportunity and start, man. You just got to fucking start.
Sit around there with the fucking poor me's and blame everybody for your situation.
Carpe
And,
diem.
Shut the fuck up, dude.
Yeah, just
you can do this.
Yeah.
And you'll find that give it a year, all right? You can swallow hard and do just about anything for a year. Do it for a year and tell me you don't feel better at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just you can do this, you need to do this.
Probably. Yeah.
You need to do it, man.
Yeah.
And the earlier you start, the more benefit you will have over time.
Yeah.
Which is why we're trying to tell guys, start now.
Yeah. Start, man.
I would be in a much different place in my life. There's a lot of decisions I can look back on that I would have made much differently if I had started and understood myself to the level that I do now because of the work that I've done.
I say the same thing, but I don't think I was ready when I was younger.
Well, and maybe not. There is a maturity aspect to it.
I think my ego was a little too big to be able to accept some of the things that I was going to tell myself.
Sure.
If I would have started getting into this, I'd have probably been like, no way, man, that's not me.
Yeah.
And I would have blown it off. So, on my own timeline, I had to get there. And I would encourage the 20-somethings to try it out, man.
Yeah.
Like, and the things that we talk about on here, they're almost anybody can learn this stuff. Like, you don't have to have any special talent to be able to do this. You just have to have a little persistent and give it the effort and time that it deserves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
That's great.
What else you got, man? Old people.
Dude, I mean, if you haven't gotten a chance to go and read some of the articles and and watch some of the interviews from these guys, it's enlightening to see the way that they talk about. All of them were very. They expressed a tremendous amount of gratitude for the situational awareness and the knowledge that they had in their elder years. They also were very conscious of the idea that their bodies just aren't the same.
Yeah.
Like my mind, I feel like I'm 20, but my body reminds me every day that I'm not.
Yeah.
So, don't take for granted some of you guys who are maybe younger or maybe even our age, don't take for granted that one day you're not going to be able to go out for that 3-mile run. It might be a 3-mile walk instead.
Dude, I run a lot and I don't necessarily like to run, but on the days that I don't, I tell myself, you get to run. There's a lot of fucking people out there that can't run.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. And I still have that opportunity. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to fucking take it.
One day, your knees may not support that. I'm having a lot of knee and ankle issues right now, so I can't run as much as I'd like to.
Yeah.
That was always my therapy, man. When I came home from a bad day from work, I'd tell Katie, give me 30 minutes. I'll be back. And I would go out and I'd run, 30, 40 minutes or whatever. And by the time I got home, it was out of my system. Yeah. And I can't do that now. So I've had to replace that with some other things. Sure. That, maybe go for a walk or
gotta find what works.
Yeah. Yeah. So the bottom line is though, as you age, hopefully you age gracefully and you're aware of these things, but that doesn't have to necessarily slow you down.
Yeah.
You can still do a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely.
Just choose a different gear.
That's it. All right, brother. You got anything else?
No, man. Be the one.
Be the change. Hey guys, one of the consistent topics we discuss on the Be One Change One podcast is the importance of resiliency, seizing opportunities, and choosing courage over comfort to achieve what is important to you. So if you're an outdoorsman, we would encourage you to explore Sick Bear Outdoors.
That's right. Sick Bear believes in using the symbol of resilience to empower your outdoor adventures and to experience the wildness of life's trails. Sick Bear adopts the bear's approach by fearlessly embracing nature, standing your ground, and courageously facing challenges. Get out of your comfort zone at sickbear.com. That's SICBEAR.com. Visit sickbear.com for all of your individual and family hunting, fishing, or outdoor adventure needs. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.